The yacht's railing dug into my back as Heather's manicured hands pushed against my chest. Her eyes, cold and determined, were the last thing I saw before plummeting 30 feet into the Atlantic. As icy water filled my lungs, one thought crystallized. My own son had just watched his wife murder me for $3 billion. They didn't search for a body. Why bother? A 63-year-old woman couldn't survive those waters. Instead, they sailed back to Miami, champagne already flowing, ready to announce my tragic accident to the board of directors waiting at Montgomery Tech. What they didn't know, I'd already transferred controlling shares to an offshore trust. What they couldn't imagine, I'd survived worse than Deepwater, including the husband who tried to steal my first company, the competitors who attempted to bankrupt me during the recession, and the board members who tried to force me out at 60. Soaked and shivering, I pulled myself onto a fisherman's boat 3 miles offshore. 24 hours later, as they walked into Montgomery headquarters with fake tears and forged documents, I stood in the boardroom doorway, very much alive, federal agents flanking me on both sides. The look on Heather's face alone was worth the hypothermia. But what happened next would change everything I thought I knew about my family, my company, and just how far someone will go when $3 billion is at stake. I built Montgomery Tech from a small software startup in my garage to one of the largest cybersecurity firms in America. 35 years of 80-hour weeks, missed vacations, and relentless innovation had earned me the nickname The Fortress in Silicon Valley, both for our unhackable security systems and my own impenetrable business persona. My husband, James, died when our son Nathan was 12. Cancer, fast and merciless. After the funeral, I doubled down on work, telling myself it was to secure our future. In reality, coding was easier than grieving. Nathan grew up in the shadow of Montgomery Tech, shuttled between our Palo Alto mansion and East Coast boarding schools. We were more like business associates than mother and son, cordial, respectful, but distant. When Nathan brought Heather home from Stanford Business School 5 years ago, I was relieved. She was brilliant, ambitious, with the kind of ruthless charm that thrives in corporate America. At their engagement party at our summer house in the Hamptons, I overheard my son's friends teasing him, "You married your mom, dude." Everyone laughed, including me. The resemblance seemed like a compliment then. Nathan joined the company as expected, heading our international expansion. Christmas dinners became quarterly performance reviews. Thanksgiving centered around market projections for the new year. We weren't the Hallmark movie family who baked cookies and shared secrets, but we were successful. I thought that was enough. 2 years ago, at the annual Montgomery Tech Charity Gala, Heather orchestrated what I now recognize as her first power move. In front of our biggest investors, government clients, and tech journalists, she clinked her champagne glass and announced my semi-retirement. I hadn't agreed to any such thing. As hundreds of eyes turned to me, she continued, "Eleanor deserves to enjoy the empire she built while she still can." The condescension dripped like honey, sweet on the surface, sticky with implication. I smiled through it, maintaining the facade. Later that night, I overheard her in the powder room, phone pressed to her ear. "The old woman won't let go. We need to accelerate the timeline." I should have confronted her then. Instead, I pretended not to hear and poured myself another scotch. My grand gesture was meant to be my legacy, not just to Nathan, but to the world. I'd spent 2 years secretly developing Montgomery Guardian, an affordable cybersecurity system for hospitals, schools, and nonprofit organizations. The corporate board opposed it, not profitable enough, so I funded it personally, building a separate team in our Boston office. It was revolutionary technology that would protect vulnerable institutions from increasingly sophisticated attacks. The official announcement was scheduled for our upcoming board meeting in Miami. What I didn't know then was that Heather had discovered the project while combing through company servers. She'd also found my medical records, the early-stage Parkinson's diagnosis I'd kept private, a slight tremor in my right hand, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. But Heather was always looking for weaknesses. The night before we left for Miami, I received an anonymous email with attached audio files, recordings from the secure line in Nathan and Heather's home office. My daughter-in-law's voice was unmistakable. "Once Eleanor's gone, we'll dismantle Guardian, sell the patents to Meridian Systems, and take Montgomery Tech public. The IPO alone will triple our net worth." My son's response haunts me still. "Are you sure this is the only way?" Not a refusal, just a question of necessity. I listened to those recordings 17 times, searching for some hint that my son was being coerced or manipulated. By the 17th replay, I had to admit the truth. Nathan Montgomery, the boy I'd raised alone, had grown into a man who valued money over his mother's life. Instead of canceling the trip, I made calls to my oldest friend at the FBI, transferred company control to a trust only I could access, and boarded our private jet to Miami with a smile fixed firmly on my face. If they wanted to play a deadly game, they'd learn what generations of Montgomery women from Maine already knew: never underestimate a survivor. The Montgomery Yacht, ironically named Family Legacy, gleamed white against Miami's turquoise waters. At 100 feet, it was an extravagance I rarely used, but maintained for corporate events. That Friday morning, our small party boarded for what was supposed to be a day trip. Myself, Nathan, Heather, our CFO Robert, and his wife Claire, my closest confidant since business school. "Mother, you look tired," Nathan commented as I stepped aboard, his tone solicitous while his eyes catalogued my every movement. "Maybe this sun will do you good." I'd deliberately exaggerated my symptoms that morning: a slight shuffle in my walk, an occasional tremor when lifting my coffee cup. "I'm fine, just a restless night planning the Guardian presentation." Heather's smile tightened at the mention of my project. "Let's not talk business today," she suggested, guiding me to a seat in the shade. "Doctor's orders. You need to relax." "What doctor?" I wondered. I hadn't authorized my physician to discuss my condition with anyone. As we pulled away from the marina, I noticed subtle changes in our usual routine. The regular crew had been replaced with faces I didn't recognize. The cabin door that typically remained unlocked was now secured with a keypad. Nathan hovered unusually close, refreshing my drink before it was empty, insisting I take a pill for seasickness that I pretended to swallow. By noon, we'd anchored in a secluded cove miles from the shipping lanes. Robert was reviewing quarterly reports below deck, the only reason he'd agreed to this excursion. Claire dozed on a lounger, her skin pinking under the Florida sun. I excused myself to use the restroom, locking the door to make a quick call to my FBI contact, confirming they were tracking our vessel's GPS. When I returned, Heather was mixing mojitos at the bar, her Yale-educated precision measuring each ingredient. "Eleanor," she called, dropping the customary "mom" she'd used for years. "I've been thinking about Guardian." I accepted the drink, but didn't sip. "Have you?" "It's admirable, but impractical. The board will never support it." She leaned against the railing, Miami's skyline a distant shimmer behind her. "Perhaps we should discuss a more graceful transition for you." "Transition?" I echoed, playing along. Nathan joined us, his hand possessively circling Heather's waist. "We've prepared a press release announcing your retirement, effective immediately. Health reasons. Very dignified." "I see." I placed my untouched drink on the table. "And if I decline this generous offer?" The couple exchanged glances, a micro-expression of frustration quickly masked. "Mother, be reasonable," Nathan sighed. "You're ill. The tremors are getting worse. The board has concerns about your decision-making." "Which board members specifically?" I asked, knowing he couldn't name any. I'd spoken with each one individually that week. "That's confidential," Heather interjected. "The point is, you need care, not corporate stress. We've arranged for a facility in Switzerland." "A facility?" I laughed, the sound harsh even to my ears. "You mean somewhere remote, where visiting hours are conveniently restricted." A sudden wave rocked the yacht, unusual in the protected cove. Everyone grabbed for support except me. I'd been bracing for this moment, literally and figuratively. "You've always been so dramatic," Nathan said, his voice dropping to a register I'd never heard before. "This could be simple. Sign the papers, enjoy your remaining years in comfort." "And if I refuse?" Heather's smile turned predatory. "Then we'll have to address your deteriorating mental capacity. We have documentation of erratic decisions, paranoid behavior. The Guardian project itself, wasting millions on unprofitable technology. Clear evidence of cognitive decline." As she spoke, Robert emerged from below, clutching his laptop, face ashen. "Eleanor, someone's accessing our secure servers. The Hong Kong accounts are being emptied." This wasn't part of my plan. Genuine alarm flashed across Heather's features before hardening into calculation. "It must be Eleanor," she declared. "She's the only one with those access codes." Nathan's eyes widened. "Mother, what have you done?" Before I could respond, Heather's phone buzzed with a text. She checked it, then nodded almost imperceptibly to my son. Whatever timeline they'd planned had just accelerated. "I need air," I announced, moving toward the bow, buying seconds to send a pre-composed text. "Now." Nathan followed, his footsteps heavy on the teak decking. "Mother, wait." "Was it your idea or hers?" I asked without turning. "The retirement home? The convenient accident if I refused?" His silence was answer enough. "I gave you everything," I said quietly. "Not just wealth, but opportunity. You never had to build anything yourself." "You never gave me anything," he hissed, suddenly beside me. "You were too busy being the fortress to be a mother. I raised myself while you built your precious company." I turned to face my son, this stranger wearing his features. "That's not true, and you know it." "What I know," he said, voice trembling, "is that you value that company more than me. Always have." Behind him, Heather approached, her manicured hand slipping something from her pocket. A syringe? I couldn't tell. "Nathan, whatever you're planning, it's too late," I warned. "I've already—" That's when Heather lunged forward, hands outstretched, not to inject, but to push. The railing hit my lower back as her full weight slammed into my chest. There was a moment, a fraction of a second, when I saw genuine horror flash across my son's face. Not at my impending death, but at the messy reality of it. Then I was falling, Heather's triumphant face receding above me, the yacht's name, family legacy, the last thing I saw before hitting the water with bone-jarring force. The impact knocked the breath from my lungs. Salt water burned my eyes, filled my nose. My designer suit dragged me down like an anchor. Fighting panic, I remembered my father's voice from childhood swimming lessons. Respect the water, Ellie, but never fear it. I kicked off my shoes, shed my jacket, and focused on controlling my breathing as I surfaced. The yacht was already moving away, no one even looking back to confirm I'd drowned. They hadn't counted on the emergency GPS beacon sewn into my watch band, activated by prolonged water exposure. A fishing boat appeared within 20 minutes. Not coincidence, but the FBI team I'd arranged to track me. As they pulled me aboard, I was already planning, not my escape, but my return. 48 hours later, dried and determined, I stood outside the Montgomery Tech headquarters in downtown Miami. The emergency board meeting Heather had called was scheduled for 10 a.m. Through the glass doors, I could see somber security guards wearing black armbands, mourning their CEO before her body was even found. My FBI contact, Special Agent Diana Torres, stood beside me along with 2 forensic accountants and the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida. "Ready, Eleanor?" Diana asked, checking her weapon. "I've been ready since I hit the water," I replied. We timed our entrance perfectly. Nathan stood at the head of the boardroom table, Heather at his side. A portrait of me already hung on the wall behind them, moved from my office with unseemly haste. "Regret to inform you that my mother's accident was confirmed fatal," Nathan was saying, his voice appropriately solemn. "The Coast Guard continues to search, but given the currents and time elapsed, the search can be called off," I announced from the doorway. "I'm right here." The blood drained from Heather's face so quickly I thought she might faint. Nathan froze mid-sentence, mouth open in a perfect O of shock. The boardroom erupted, people standing, shouting questions, security rushing forward, then stopping in confusion. Through it all, I walked calmly to my chair at the head of the table. "Please, everyone sit," I said, voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "We have serious business to discuss." "Mother," Nathan stammered, "we thought, the boat captain said—" "That I fell overboard? I did, or rather, I was pushed." I nodded to Agent Torres, who began distributing folders to each board member. "You'll find evidence of significant financial crimes committed by both my son and daughter-in-law, including embezzlement, tax evasion, and, most seriously, conspiracy to commit murder." Heather found her voice, high and brittle with panic. "That's absurd. Eleanor clearly had some kind of episode. Her Parkinson's is in the earliest stages and fully controlled with medication," I finished for her. "My neurologist's full report is in your packets, along with statements from every doctor who's examined me in the past year. None support claims of cognitive decline." I turned to face my son directly. "What you'll also find are recordings of conversations between Nathan and Heather discussing my elimination, transfers of company funds to personal accounts, and communications with Meridian Systems to sell proprietary technology, specifically the Guardian Project." The board members flipped through pages with increasing horror. Robert, our CFO, looked physically ill. "This is a setup," Nathan insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. "Mother has always been paranoid about losing control. Is that why you agreed to murder me? I asked quietly. The room fell silent. Not just to stand by, Nathan, but to actively plan it? Your father would be ashamed. At the mention of James, something broke in my son's expression. You don't get to talk about Dad, he snarled. You abandoned him during his treatments to chase government contracts. You were at a meeting when he died. The accusation hit harder than Heather's hands on my chest. I was securing our future, your future. You were securing your legacy, he shot back. That's all you've ever cared about. Claire, my oldest friend, spoke up from the end of the table. Nathan, I was there when your father died. Your mother had just signed the contract that saved this company from bankruptcy. James insisted she go to that meeting. She's lying, Heather interjected, just like she's lying about being pushed. Eleanor jumped, a suicide attempt, because she knew we'd discovered her embezzlement of company funds for this ridiculous Guardian project. I smiled then, which seemed to unnerve her more than my anger would have. Guardian isn't funded by Montgomery Tech, I explained, addressing the board. I financed it personally, which you'd know if you'd read the prospectus being distributed now. As security guards entered, real ones this time, not the replacements Heather had hired, my daughter-in-law made her final desperate play. She's destroying this company out of spite, Heather shouted, slamming her hand on the table. Eleanor would rather burn Montgomery Tech to the ground than let anyone else lead it. No, I said, standing to my full height. I built this company to last beyond me. What I won't allow is its transformation into the kind of corporation that values profit over people's safety. I nodded to Agent Torres, who stepped forward with handcuffs. Nathan and Heather Montgomery, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, securities fraud, and corporate espionage. As they were led away, Nathan looked back once. The hatred in his eyes had morphed to something worse, indifference. In that moment, I realized I'd lost my son long before he'd tried to kill me. Perhaps I'd never really had him at all. I turned to address the stunned board members. Now, shall we discuss the official launch of Montgomery Guardian? The media frenzy was immediate and merciless. Tech Titan survives murder plot, screamed the headlines. Billion-dollar betrayal, son tries to drown mother for fortune. Cable news ran 24-hour coverage. Internet sleuths dissected every Montgomery family photo ever taken, searching for signs they'd missed. Our stock initially plummeted, then rebounded when I announced the Guardian launch would proceed as planned. In the empty echoes of my Palo Alto home, victory felt hollow. I'd survived, yes, won, technically, but maternal instinct doesn't simply vanish because your child becomes unrecognizable. Each night, I replayed our final conversation on the yacht, searching for something I could have said differently. 3 days after the arrests, Claire arrived unannounced, letting herself in with the key she'd had for decades. "You look terrible," she announced, setting down grocery bags in my kitchen. "Thanks," I replied dryly. "Attempted murder doesn't do wonders for one's complexion." She ignored my sarcasm, pouring 2 glasses of wine. "I spoke with Robert. The board is rattled but solidly behind you. Guardian launches next month as scheduled." I nodded, barely hearing her. My mind was stuck on Nathan's accusation about his father's death. Had I truly been absent when James needed me most? "Eleanor," Claire's voice cut through my thoughts. "Stop it. I can see you spiraling." He wasn't entirely wrong, I admitted, about James. About me choosing work, Claire's expression hardened. James made his own choices too, including keeping secrets from you. What are you talking about? She sighed heavily. I promised I'd never tell you, but given everything, James didn't want treatment for his cancer. Stage 4, spreading rapidly. He refused experimental options that might have given him another few months. That's not possible. I arranged everything with his doctors. And he canceled it all, she interrupted. He didn't want you watching him deteriorate. Said it would break you, distract you when the company needed you most. He made me promise to keep you focused on work during those final weeks. The room seemed to tilt. Why wouldn't he tell me himself? Because you would have fought him on it. You would have moved heaven and earth trying to save him, bankrupting yourself and the company in the process. Claire reached across the table, gripping my hand. He loved you, Eleanor, enough to make the hardest choice so you wouldn't have to. I felt decades of guilt shifting, not disappearing, but transforming. Nathan doesn't know this. No, James thought it would burden him. The next morning, I drove to the detention center where Nathan was being held pending trial. We sat across from each other, separated by plexiglass, identical expressions of exhaustion on our faces. If you're here for an apology, you're wasting your time, he said immediately. I'm not, I replied. I'm here to tell you about your father. For the next hour, I shared everything Claire had told me, along with memories of James that Nathan had been too young to remember. How his father had fought to build our first company, the sacrifices he'd made, the pride he'd felt watching Nathan grow. He wanted more for you than just wealth. He wanted you to understand the value of building something that helps others. Nathan's expression remained impassive, but his eyes had softened slightly. Is that what Guardian is? Your attempt to finally be the person Dad wanted you to be? No, I answered honestly. It's me finally being the person I always wanted to be. When I rose to leave, he spoke again. Heather approached me with the plan, not the other way around. I just didn't stop her. It wasn't an apology, but it was something, a small truth in a sea of betrayal. The legal proceedings moved swiftly. Heather, facing the more serious charges and abandoned by my son's lawyers, accepted a plea deal, implicating Nathan in exchange for a reduced sentence. The evidence was overwhelming. Voice recordings, financial transfers, the yacht's security footage showing the push. My son received 15 years, Heather, 25. During this time, I made two significant decisions. First, I accelerated the Guardian project, partnering with the Department of Education to protect schools nationwide from cyber attacks. Second, I established the Montgomery Second Chance Foundation, providing technology training and job placement for former inmates. The latter wasn't public knowledge until 6 months after the sentencing, when I received an unexpected letter from prison. Mother, I hear what you're doing with the foundation. Dad would have approved. N. 2 simple sentences. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but acknowledgement. Guardian launched to international acclaim. Schools, hospitals, and nonprofits finally had protection against the increasing wave of ransomware attacks. The technology Nathan and Heather had dismissed as unprofitable saved an estimated $4.7 billion in potential damages during its first year. Perhaps the most unexpected development came through Claire, who'd been sorting through company archives for the Montgomery Tech Museum. She discovered old research notes from James, preliminary work on exactly the type of security protocol Guardian now employed. He was working on this before the cancer diagnosis, Claire explained, showing me the yellowed pages covered in my husband's distinctive handwriting. It looks like Guardian was his idea originally. I traced his penmanship with my fingertip. He knew I'd finish it someday. The tremor in my hand was more noticeable now, my Parkinson's progressing despite medication. I'd finally appointed a successor as CEO, Robert's daughter Jennifer, who'd worked her way up through every department of Montgomery Tech over 15 years. The board unanimously approved. On the anniversary of the Yacht incident, as it had come to be known in company lore, I received another brief message from Nathan. Watching the Guardian implementation at the prison library, your code is still elegant, if slightly outdated. I've noted some potential improvements. Attaching file if you're interested. N. Attached was a detailed security analysis with suggestions that were, I had to admit, brilliant. I forwarded it to our development team without revealing the source. 3 days later, I visited the prison again. "Did you look at my notes?" he asked immediately. "Implementation begins next quarter," I replied. He nodded, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. For a moment, I glimpsed the boy who'd once spent hours beside me at the computer, learning to code before he could properly write. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said after a long silence. "I know, but I'd like to understand why you started Guardian in the first place." I considered my answer carefully. Because protection shouldn't be a luxury only the wealthy can afford. It wasn't everything, but it was a beginning, a small bridge across an ocean of hurt. Not the family reunion I'd once imagined, but perhaps something more honest. As I left, the guard handed me another note from my son. "The Foundation's coding curriculum needs work. Send me the syllabus." I smiled for the first time in months. It seemed the Montgomery legacy would continue after all, just not in the way any of us had expected. It's been 3 years since that day on the yacht. Montgomery Guardian now protects over 15,000 schools and 3,200 hospitals nationwide. My Parkinson's has progressed, but I still consult on major decisions. And yes, I still review Nathan's security suggestions, which arrive monthly from his prison cell. People often ask if I've forgiven my son. The truth is more complicated. I understand him better now. We're rebuilding something that resembles a relationship, one based not on blood obligation, but on shared purpose. It's not the family I imagined, but it's real. As for Heather, I've channeled my anger into ensuring the Montgomery Second Chance Foundation helps women like her, brilliant minds who chose shortcuts instead of building something lasting. Some call it ironic. I call it breaking the cycle. The most valuable lesson from all this: legacy isn't what you leave behind when you're gone. It's what you build while you're here. Money and power mean nothing if they don't serve something greater than yourself. I no longer fear being pushed aside, literally or figuratively. When you know who you are and what you stand for, no one can take that from you, not even family. If my story resonated with you, consider subscribing to hear more journeys of resilience and reinvention. And remember, sometimes the most important hand that pulls you from the water is your own.